where plants with seeds have to be fertilized. So you have to have a male and a female part to the plant, or male and female plants.
So it's kind of interesting because those spore ones are older.
Yeah.
Before sex came around, I love to say it.
It is, yeah, you're right, that's perfect. Okay, so let's go to, I'm going to jump a couple slides here and come back to this one later. This one, okay. So seeded plants. In seeded plants, there's two types. There's monocots and dicots. And they have special characteristics. One, let's go down monocots first. Venation, which is, the easiest way to do this. Venation, the easiest way to do this is to look. Venation, as you can see in this plant, all the veins go from this end to this end, straight line, parallel. I'll let you guys look at that and pass that around and put one in the back.
Just got trimmed.
And then, I'll get this one for you. So you see how the veins go down. And they basically go along the leaf in a parallel form, though they may come together at the point, but they come along and they kind of start out and flare out from this where they attach to the stem, but the veins go parallel. Now, flower parts, flowers will be divisible by 3. So you're going to have 3 sepals, which we'll talk about what sepals are a little more later, but they're the green part of the flower, usually, not always, usually, that covers the bud and keeps it safe until the petals are all formed and all the insides formed. And it decides to open. Then it usually has 3 petals. It'll be divisible by 3. Okay? Now they only have 1 pistil because they don't have more than 1 pistil. And stamen don't always work in that part. Sometimes they are divisible by 3 and sometimes they're not. We won't worry about that. But it's the petals and the sepals are divisible by 3. So they'll either have 3, 6, or 9 for the most part. But where they really get into monocots is in the seed. If you can see, there is 1 cotydome. That means there is only 1 part to the seed with the food, the outer shell, the beginning of the plant, all inside of it. And when it comes, how many people when they were kids did the growing the bean experiments? When it comes up, and the first thing you see in a bean is it's closed and it opens and has 2, right? Well, monocots don't. They just come up. 1. Dicots open and have 2. A bean is a dicot. It opens up and has 2. And then the leaves really start forming. And that part was where all the food is for the plant to start growing. And it will shrivel as the plant starts to grow because it'll use up all that food. So that's what the cotydome is, and that's what decides whether they're monocots or dicots, really. But then they have other characteristics that help you. So lots of times you don't see that if you don't have a seed with you of that plant, or you don't have a young sprout and have that, can see whether it's a monocot or dicot. You have these other characteristics you can look at. And then if you look at a cross-section at the bottom of the vascular system, the phylum and xylem are kind of erratic throughout the stem. They aren't set up in layers like the dicot is with a layer that has the xylem and phloem in the plant and a center structure that's the pith or the center, or the hardwood. So, they don't have that system. So we kind of compared them now, except for we didn't compare the leaves. The dicot can have veins, but their veins start from the center, and they go out on the leaf. They start from the center and they grow out. So either they'll be pinnated or they'll be palmated, are two variations. We'll get into some more variations later. But they're going to have a center one and they're going to branch off of that vein in the leaf. Or they're going to branch. You have a center and branch and branch and branch and then branch off those. And the flower parts are going to be in 4s and 5s. So they're going to have 4s, 5s, 8s, 8 parts, 5 parts, and that's going to be on the sepals and the petals. Okay, and then the seed is like the bean that comes up and has those 2 cots that have the food storage in it, so the plant can grow. And then we already talked. They have examples of a forb. The cross section of a forb is the first one. The second would be the start of a bush or a small tree, and then the one to the right is the tree with the bark, the hardwood, the cambium layer with the xylem and phloem cells in it. So that's the difference between monocots and dicots. How does this help you? With the books, a lot of times monocots and dicots will sometimes be separated out. So you don't have to look as many plants if you know automatically it's a monocot or a dicot. You don't have to look as many plants. You know, okay, it's a monocot, it's a dicot, I only need to look at these families. If it's a monocot, I only need to look at these families, it's a dicot. So it kind of helps you out. Though, I won't say that. I think there are a few more dicots. There's a few more varieties in dicot. Monocots are going to be all your grasses, and then you're going to also have some other flowering plants. So it's kind of weird how we classify sometimes, because it gets very confusing. Whoops. So we're going to go on. They also divide plants into woody plants and herbaceous plants. Now, this is another division that doesn't even necessarily divide monocots and dicots, because woody plants, trees and shrubs, are all going to be dicots. But forbs, half of your forbs are going to be dicots and half of them are monocots. But all your grasses are going to be monocots. Most part.
Oh.
So, because that plant that I gave you right there blooms and has a flower, but when I gave you a sample of this one blooms and has a flower that has 3 petals, and I think it has 3 sepals also. And it blooms. It's not blooming right now. It has been.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's probably a pretty stupid one.
Okay.
No stupid
But
questions.
now it's my
No stupid questions.
So, is there a theory out there, like, so things evolved with monocots and dicots? Is there a reason why monocots kind of where they are more effective than a dike? You know, why is there a reason why there's kind of stuff like that?
I don't know
It's like
why
saying
they
because
evolved.
it has this type of environment, the other one does better than one.
Yeah, I don't know why they evolved that way. They can grow in the same environments right next to each other. So I don't see that there's an advantage one way or the other.
Okay, so it was kind of stupid.
But no, it's a good question, and there's probably some research done on that. I just haven't ever read it all.
Okay.
There's so much stuff to read on plants, it's hard.
Yeah, because you see them together. And
Yeah.
I wondered if I went, oh, I should expect to see this more in this area, or this more, or something like that. But not. They're just all over.
Yeah, other than, that you expect to see woody plants and shrubs in some areas that you don't expect,
Right.
and you expect to see graminoids and forbs in other areas. This division almost makes more sense to me, if I'm looking at habitat, because, woody plants and brush are gonna be in certain areas. And grasses, you know, if you go out in the prairie and the Great Plains, you're gonna have lots of grasses and forbs, and you're gonna have forbs with them, but you aren't gonna have very many trees. And you aren't even gonna have very many shrubs. But then you can go out into a sagebrush meadow where you have no trees and you just have shrubs, grasses, and forbs. And then you go into a forest and you have all forb categories. So, I don't know why they decide to distinguish themselves. What I did like about this definition is dividing woody plants, trying to tell us whether something is a tree or a shrub. And this is hard to say, because sometimes we call them a tree and sometimes we call them a shrub when they get into that 16-foot area. But mainly a tree has a main single stem trunk. And a shrub has a multiple stem arising from near the ground. From or near the ground. So that's how so some people will say, okay, you've got mountain ash out here. Is it a tree or a shrub? Most of the time it has multiple stems coming out from or near the ground in a wild situation. Now if you put it in your yard and manicure it, you can make it have one stem and you can make it into a tree if you want to. So, I've seen them do that, and then they will sell them as trees in the nursery because they groomed them to be that way.
Power we have.
And then you can do the same thing with rose trees and rose bushes, so you know you can alter them, but I guess we're talking about their natural state. We're going to end up going into forbs a lot. Grasses. If anybody wants to study grasses, sedges, and rushes, all I remember about grasses, sedges, and rushes. Sedges have edges, rushes are round. That's how you tell a sedge from a rush. And grasses or anything else. Just about. So, forbs. We'll go into forbs. Forbs is what most people want to talk about, trees and forbs. Few people want to talk about shrubs because of huckleberries, and they want to know what berry is out there. But, yeah. So, more things on the life cycle. Woody plants also live for several to hundreds of years, and they are perennial. They come back every year. Okay, that center stalk holds them up, it gives them a long life. They know how to take a bunch of different environmental factors and keep going. Some of them are evergreens, and they keep their leaves or needles all year round, and other ones are deciduous, and that means they lose their leaves or needles for part of the year. Now, we always think of deciduous trees always losing their leaves or needles in the winter. If you ever lived in Oregon, especially around the coastal, southern coast of Oregon and northern California, there's a tree called madrone down there that is deciduous but has leaves all winter during the rainy season. And when the summer comes and it gets hot and it doesn't rain for all the month of August and September, it loses its leaves and restarts its leaves late November. So not all trees lose them in the winter. There are some trees that have other factors, and I'm sure there's other trees in other parts of the world, but that's when since I lived there, I remember it growing. And if you've ever cut that tree, when you cut it, you have to cut it while it's wet or still alive, because once it dries, it's so hard that you can't hardly cut it with a chainsaw. It has so much water in that plant. If you cut it, water will be coming out of the tree as you're cutting it. It's very interesting. You get all wet cutting it with a chainsaw. It grows almost like a weed there, so people are always brushing it back because it gets so thick. You have to brush it back. Otherwise, you can't walk anywhere on your property. It makes excellent firewood, but you have to cut it. You have to split it while it's still green. And when you split it with the axe, again, water comes out as you're hitting it, and you're splitting it. And then you have to let it dry for at least 2 to 3 years before you can burn it, because you have to have all that moisture to leave that tree. And once you have it, it's so hard. It burns with a blue flame and fantastic heat, and hardly any ash. It burns completely. But when they have fires in that area, if there's dead madrone, they're really dangerous because they are so heat intense, you can't get near them. So.
And they provided that leaf litter too.
Oh yeah, and
Which
they
is
provide it
right at the
peak time, yeah. Right at the peak time. Okay, and then herbaceous plants generally die back. Now, grasses, sometimes your grasses don't die all the way back if you don't have a really cold year. I know, and you can keep watering them and they won't die back. But naturally, they usually have a die back time. Annual plants grow for 1 year and die in a single year. That's all and how they regenerate is by seed. That's their system. Biennials grow for 2 years, seed the second year. Sometimes they seed the first and second year, and then they die off. And they expect their seeds to continue their species. Perennials will live for many generations, and they will seed every year, or not always. Sometimes they don't seed every year, but they don't have to. If something happens that they don't seed, like the weather is bad and they don't get enough moisture and they don't develop seeds after they flower, it won't really kill them. It won't bother them as much. They'll still be there next year. Or if they get eaten off, the flower heads get eaten off so they don't get seed, it won't bother them as much because they've got another year they can grow and they can keep growing. So, and lots of people, I don't know if you're like me, I love to put perennials in my garden because I don't like to replant everything all the time. My flower beds I have perennial beds. I have one annual bed, everything else is perennial. I don't want to replant every year. Okay, so those are kind of the way we divide things up. And that was kind of fast, but that kind of, let me go back to that one slide, see if we did everything here. So that kind of got us down to this point. Flowering plants, so we have conifers, and we have dicots, which were flowering plants, and in flowering plants we have, which are angiosperms, we had monocots and dicots that divided into the two pieces. So let's go back to parts of plants. Okay, we're going to talk about parts of plants. Now this is a real simple plant we're just going to be talking about. Most plants have, and we're going to talk about flowering plants now. They're going to be either monocots or dicots, though we aren't going to go into the rest. We're going to go into fours. They're gonna have a center stem